Just waiting for confirmation.
Okay, all right, so we're going live. So council, I'd like to call this regular council meeting of July 13th, 2021 to order. I'd like to call for adoption of the agenda. I would like to have one item, section 90.1K to the agenda item 15, which is in camera. So if someone wants to make that motion for me, including that, Councillor Gillette, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes from the regular council meeting of June 22nd, 2021. Somebody want to make that motion? Again, Councillor Gillette, Councillor Palmer, thank you. All in favor? Motion carried. Any business arising from those council minutes of June 22nd? Seeing none, we are going to go on to item 5A, development services. Mr. Simon, I understand you have a presentation for us.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Your Worship. Give me a second here to pull it up. So the item that we have before council today is a development variance permit application. This application is seeking to reduce the minimum building width as well as the minimum side yard setback requirements for a property that is located at 412 6th Street East. Your Worship, if there's anyone that can't see the screen or is having any issues, please let me know as I start to run through the presentation.
All right, thank you.
So staff are recommending approval of the variance to vary both minimum side yard setback requirements as well as the minimum building width as specified in zoning bylaw number 1264. And we'll get into some details as to why staff are recommending approval. So we'll start off with a little bit of an overview of the background on the property, get into the details of the proposal itself, and then conclude with the staff evaluation and reiterate the recommendation. So the subject property is located at 412 6th Street East. It is zoned R2, which is single and two family residential zone. It is surrounded by residential properties. You can see the current dwelling actually straddles two legal lot lines. So the orange delineates one existing legal lot and the red delineates another. You can see the current dwelling at 412 6th Street East does straddle these lot lines. This is a historic subdivision prior to the zoning regulations that would regulate items such as minimum lot size as well as minimum lot frontage. So future development on this lot, and again, keep in mind future development would be development on the red lot, which is the lot in question today, and then development on the orange lot at a future date would require demolition and or relocation of all existing buildings on site. So the adjacent properties are zoned residential 2 as well, and you can see the closest lot being next door. The dwelling is located approximately 2.5 meters from the property line. So that kind of gives you a good idea of the development context that is in the immediate vicinity of the red lot that is in question today. So because this is a development variance permit and under the Local Government Act, anytime we are looking to vary the regulations in a city bylaw as spurred by an application, we are required to provide notice to impacted property owners. So 168 property owners were provided this notice within a 100-meter radius of the subject lands, and staff did receive 2 letters in opposition or expressing concerns with respect to the variance that are included in the agenda package. So getting into some details of the proposal now, the variance is again looking to reduce both minimum side yard setback requirements. So the minimum side yard setback requirement is 1.5 meters. The applicant is seeking to vary it from 1.5 to 1.22 meters. In addition, to allow for a building to be constructed on this historic narrow lot, they are looking for a variance to reduce the minimum building width from what the requirement is, which is 6 meters, down to 5.18 meters. The existing lot is about 236 square meters in size, so it's not a very large lot. And with these variances, it would allow for about a 90 square meter building envelope. Without the variances, building a dwelling to comply with zoning regulations would be impossible because the lot is only about 7.7 meters wide. So when you add up the minimum requirements of 1.5 meter side yard setback requirements and 6 meter minimum dwelling width, it would make it an undevelopable lot. So no other variances are requested with this application. So with respect to other zoning regulations, such as maximum height requirement, which is 10 meters, or maximum lot coverage, which is 40%, there's no other variances that are being requested at this time. And part of the proposal is the applicant is looking to construct this house with passive design standards for the walls to help improve energy efficiency, which does align with the sustainability goals of the OCP. This street overview kind of provides council with a cross-section of the look of the street and how the applicant is proposing that this narrow dwelling could fit in with the neighborhood. And keep in mind that, final design and details and technical elements of the proposal would be provided and evaluated further at building permit stage. So in staff's review of the application, we are supportive of the variance for the following reasons. The variance does allow for further infill housing options on an existing lot that does contain the R2 zoning to ultimately diversify housing stock within the city. The building is proposed to be constructive utilizing passive design, which does align with OCP sustainability goals to help reduce energy consumption and thereby reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The zoning side yard setbacks of 1.5 meters, combined when you're looking at it with an adjacent lot, 1.5 meters on both lots would ultimately allow for about a 3 meter separation between the lots. The variance going down to 1.22 meters. As discussed, the closest building on the adjacent lot is about 2.5 meters away from the property line. So this would allow for, between a 3.5 and 4 meter separation between the buildings. And in addition, the city's fire and building departments have reviewed to ensure that the design is technically feasible with safety standards that typically require a 1.2 meter separation from property line to building. There are specifics within the building code when you do start to get to that 1.2 meter separation from the property line for a dwelling, and these would be confirmed and evaluated by the building official prior to issuing any future building permit to ensure alignment with the BC building code. Therefore, staff are recommending approval of this variance, and the recommended staff resolution is on the screen. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Council, is there one of you motion on the table?
Palmer, Mayor Sulz, could I ask a couple of questions before? Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Simon, and for the details on that. And I like the idea of the densification, which is interesting, sort of going back to the future kind of thing. The designs of densification were acceptable 100 years ago, or sort of coming back, so I'm in favor of that. I do have a couple of questions. We're in the heritage conservation area. I might not have the term correct. Could you outline what requirements are for new building construction in the heritage preservation area?
So through your worship, this property does not fall within the heritage conservation area. Properties that do fall within the heritage conservation area do require a heritage alteration permit, and there are guidelines within the OCP for those types of developments, but those do not apply to this property because it does not fall within the heritage conservation area. I will note for council, it is just on the outskirts of the heritage conservation area.
Through the mayor, that's interesting. I looked at it and I thought I identified that it was in the remote possibility that if council agrees to this, then that would change it. In that remote possibility that it actually is in the heritage protection area.
Through your worship, staff always do another check on any building permit application to see if subject lands fall within a development permit area or the heritage conservation area, but we did the check on this application and the subject land is just outside of it. I would note that the properties on the opposite side of the laneway do fall within the heritage conservation area, but the subject lands that are before council today do not fall within the area.
Okay, that's all the questions. That's all the questions. So council, I'll get someone to put this motion. Councilor Ryan?
I also want to put on
Okay,
that, do I have to read the whole thing? Can I just say as outlined in the package?
sure.
That development permits, the variance permit DVP 2021-006 be approved as outlined in our package.
That's at 412 6th Street East.
Yes, at 4126.
Okay. And then if you could just do A and B, please.
A and B, section 7.3.6C and 7.3.7B as outlined in the package.
Great, that's the minimum building width requirements. So this development variance permit before us that we're weighing in on, we're weighing in on the reduction of the minimum side yard setbacks and then minimum building width requirements for the zoning bylaw. Any seconder for that motion, please? Councilor Burchell?
I'll second it and then.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
So one of the letters opposed to this was the neighbor who is concerned about their fence and snow shedding from the roof of this building onto their fence. Would it be possible to attach the condition to the variance that I don't know the technical terms, but the things that you put on the roofs so that the snow doesn't shed?
In your package, the proponent has sent a letter dealing with that. So his indication was he was hoping to use a non-slippery snow type or roof and then put some snow stops on it. And if they did put a slippery type roof on, then they would still put snow stops on it to hold all the snow. Mr. Simon, do you want to weigh in on what the proponent has stated in his letter, just for clarification for the public and for council?
To your worship, that is correct. It is outlined in the letter from the proponent, and staff have also discussed with the proponent measures to mitigate the impact of snow shedding from one property to another. I will note that that is a civil issue between the two property owners should in the future there ever be any issues that do arise. And staff typically avoid conditioning permits to that effect because then it would put some liability on the municipality should there ever be an issue with respect to snow shedding between the two properties. That again is a civil matter between them. But again, staff have relayed the concerns from the adjacent property owner to the applicant, and the applicant has outlined in their letter how they chose to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. That clarified things for you, Councilor Burchell. So
yes, I guess my issue is not specifically with this, but like we're, as far as I'm concerned, council is making a decision about this lot, and it's great that the proponent's saying this or that, but they might turn around and sell it in 6 months and someone else will build. But we're adding legal variances to that lot from now until it gets changed sometime in the distant future. So, I can appreciate that adding liability to the city is probably not a good idea. So I'm not going to push for that because that's
So
a good idea, but I'm just, whatever a proponent says they're going to do, I'll take them at their word. But all these kinds of things, plans change, businesses go bankrupt for whatever reason, someone gets divorced and suddenly it's up for sale. There's lots of things. So I'm more concerned about looking at the long-term future and what the zoning of that land is.
Yeah. And I appreciate your concern because we've had other properties come, we've had them rezoned for people and then they sell the property and there it sits. In this case, this proponent has plans. He is working on the plans of the house and is a reputable local construction company. So he is planning to build this. If you have questions of him, he is on this call. But I would prefer that we go through Mr. Simon to answer the questions. At this point, again, I'm going to go back to what Mr. Simon said about liability, but also that we're weighing in on side yard setbacks and minimum building width requirements, and not the building permit itself or what's going to be built. That will be dealt with the planning department at the building permit stage. Okay, Councilor Palmer?
Thank you, Your Worship. Further to that, I actually have the same concerns, and I'm a little bit surprised that a proponent could build, say, a roof with a metal roof that sheds onto the neighbor's property. And so that is definitely going back to the 1920s. We see some of those problems in buildings already. With that uncertainty, I couldn't support this. And I guess I'm a little bit surprised, certainly not a professional in that area, that the codes or whatever wouldn't require retaining shedding snow on the property. It seems to me, just from my perspective, that it would seem logical that that could be a requirement of keeping the snow on. So, for example, not a fair comparison, but if we look at the post office building, there's massive engineering requirements to retain that snow on that building for the protection of individuals. And to suggest that we're reducing our liability by not requiring something that seems like it should be there seems to be a contradiction. So based on that, I would not support this variance.
Mr. Matusi?
Yes, Your Worship. I wonder if you get Mr. Simon to just clarify, is the concern of the neighbor that it doesn't shed snow on the property line, and the requirement by law is that it won't? I think the difference may be, and I may be misinterpreted, but if we get just Mr. Simon to comment on this again, to clarify, is there a requirement that the snow be retained on the subject property or not? Maybe that's the easiest way to say it.
Okay, Mr. Simon and then Ms. Wade.
To Your Worship, so in terms of city bylaw regulations, I may have to defer to Ms. Wade and potentially our public operations group to determine if we do have bylaw requirements that do require all snow to be retained on each individual property. I will say that staff did speak with the neighbor that was concerned, and what they were really looking for was a formal acknowledgement from the property owner, which I believe they provided in their letter, that they would be installing some type of measure to mitigate the impact of the snowdrift between the two properties. But again, I would defer to Ms. Wade and potentially our public operations group to see if we do have bylaw requirements that require the snow to be maintained on each individual property.
Ms. Wade, would you weigh in, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to clarify. First of all, we, in this case, the variance is following under the zoning bylaw. And then when it comes to the building itself, it is regulated under the BC Building Code and our building bylaw. And as such, when we have a situation like this, it is between the two landowners to talk about how the snow is shed and any impacts, which this conversation has gone forward with. We do not have any bylaws that says you must retain snow on one lot and how it would be retained. What we have done is worked with our building inspector, and what would happen in this case is when the building plans come forward, there would be a discussion about the snow stops and the mitigation of that as the building permit is reviewed, which is standard process. And I know that our building inspector, Bernie Zimmer, is on the call today if you have any requirements in regards to how we deal with this from a building code perspective. So if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I want to be really clear that we stick to the regulations and the bylaws and how they pertain, one to land use and one to building.
Great, thank you for that clarification. I'm just going to make a statement that in my neighborhood, when I built my house, had I put on a steel roof, I would be taking out my neighbor's carport every winter, and my neighbor happens to be my aunt. So when I worked with my contractor, we definitely put asphalt shingles on, not a single amount of snow gets shed. My next door neighbor on the other side built a very steep peak house with a metal roof, and he put snow stops all around, and it actually works extremely well. There isn't any snow that comes off, so it's just really simple conversation to have with the contractor. The contractor is on the line, he's hearing this conversation. So Mr. Zimmer, I'll just get you to weigh in as far as how that conversation would work at building permit time so that we can carry on with this and move forward. Mr. Zimmer, are you on the meeting? So I'm not hearing from him, but I know the proponent is on. So Mr. Hoffart, can I ask this question? Would you be willing to mitigate snow shedding from your new building onto the neighbor's property as you build and move forward? And we'll discuss that at building permit time with our staff.
Oh, okay. Hello, I'm unmuted now.
You're unmuted. So Mr. Zimmer?
Okay.
Go ahead. So my question was, we're talking about snow sloughing off the roof here as we get into the building permit with this. I know that's not what's on the docket here before us, but we want to talk briefly about that sort of thing to make sure that council's aware that that this building will not be infringing upon the neighbors when it's built. You want to weigh in a little bit about how that process works, please?
Yeah, typically at building permit stage, the discussion will come up. Of course, we don't want to, by issuing a building permit, affect another property. Oh.
Okay, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, very clearly. Thank you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. So just carry on, Mr. Zimmer. Thank you. Oh, he's now left the meeting. Go ahead, Mr. Simon.
To your worship, yeah, just further to what Ms. Wade had said and what Bernie was saying, staff do work with the applicant and they do review these measures at building permit stage to ensure that, you know, any impact to an adjacent property is mitigated against appropriately. And I see Mr. Zimmer is back on here now, so I'm not too sure if you might want to add on to that a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. We would deal with that at building permit stage, asking the questions. We don't want to have issues with neighbors because we issue a permit. Still not? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just would like to also say that there are a variety of ways of dealing with that. Snow arresters, type of roofing material, how the roof is sloped. So that's why it's, rather than putting a condition on at this stage, we can address it at the building permit stage.
Great, thank you for your comments. Mr. Palmer, does that answer your question and alleviate your concern?
I understand the answer, thanks.
Okay, all right. So any further discussion on the motion on the table regarding the variance permit for 4126 Street East? Seeing no further questions, I will call the question. All those in favor of this variance permit? Opposed? Note that Councillor Palmer is opposed. The balance of council is in favor. This motion is passed. Thank you. Moving on to item 5B, Stokley variance permit for 1695 Nixon Road. You have a presentation?
Yes, Your Worship. I'll just bring it up now. Just before I begin, can you see the presentation up in front of you?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. So the applicant has applied for a development variance permit. This is to reduce the side yard setback abutting Nixon Road from 6 meters to 3 meters. And this is for a proposed mixed-use building and the rear yard parking. And then also to vary the parking surfacing standard from pavement to gravel surfacing. And the applicant has also applied for a scenic corridor development permit. So this is for the form and character of the 2-story mixed-use building and the site development. So staff recommendation is that the development variance permit be approved. And this is for 3 different variances. And then also with this presentation is for the development permit, and that the development permit be approved with a precondition of issuance. So this would be a precondition that the applicant provides the city with a landscaping security, and this is an amount of 125% of the landscape estimate that they provided, and this is provided from a professional. So just to get into the presentation overview, I'll be going over the background property details, the public notification and consultation process, proposal overview, the staff evaluation of both the variance and the development permit, and then the staff recommendations to conclude. So the subject property is located at 1695 Nixon Road. This is in the Big Eddy area, and the property currently contains a mobile home and accessory building, and the applicant is proposing to remove these buildings and redevelop the lot with a mixed-use commercial and residential development. The property is currently serviced by community water and on-site septic and zone service commercial. The surrounding land uses are a mix of residential, commercial, and industrial zone properties. And the property is within the scenic corridor development permit area and also the environmental hazards, the Big Eddy floodplain development permit area. And the applicant has applied for, a separate minor development permit. This is under DP 2021-013, and this is specifically for the floodplain, which is delegated to staff to review and issue and requires a geotechnical assessment. So as the variance application seeks to vary requirements in the zoning bylaw, all landowners within 100 meters of the subject lands have been provided notice, and this is in accordance with the Local Government Act provisions. And 31 properties were captured in the 100-meter notification area, which you can see on the screen just surrounding the property there. Staff have not received any public submissions from any of the neighboring properties. So the application was also presented to the Advisory Planning Commission. This is specifically the development permit for form and character, as development variance permits do not go to the commission for review. So this was reviewed on June 15th. The commission did pass a resolution in support of the proposed development as it's consistent with the existing neighborhood and also the development permit area guidelines for the scenic corridor. And then both the development variance permit and the development permit applications were referred out to the standard referral agencies, which are development services, including building services, engineering, public works, fire rescue services, parks, recreation culture, interior health, BC Hydro, Fortis BC, TELUS, and the RCMP. And staff have not received any concerns raised by any of the referral agencies. So for a bit about the proposal, the applicant is proposing to construct a 2-story mixed-use building, which would have 3 commercial units on the first floor and 3 residential units on the second floor with an accessory building detached, parking, and then surrounding landscaping. So the applicant is requesting to reduce the side yard setback abutting Nixon Road from 6 meters to 3 meters. So that you can see here on the screen in the image beside you, this is a request for the mixed-use building and also for the rear yard parking that's within the side yard setback. So any parking within the required rear needs to meet, it can be within the required rear, but needs to meet the side setback. So proposed 3-meter setback is what the applicant has outlined here, and you can see what the 6-meter setback is that they're varying. So those are the proposed variances of the side setback, and then they're also proposing to vary the parking surfacing standard to allow for gravel surfacing. So let's go over the key site design features. So the applicant has proposed a gravel access trail. So you can see here on the screen, the gravel access trail goes between the rear parking, which is for residential and staff parking, and then with the front, with the commercial parking to the commercial portion of the building on the first floor. They've proposed 20 parking stalls, and illumination must be restricted to the lot. They also have proposed 7 bike parking stalls, which is in the front here. And there are some concrete paving in the front around the mixed-use building here with gravel here. They've also proposed feature boulders, raised planter beds, and then landscaping around the perimeter, which is in the form of trees, both deciduous and coniferous, shrubs, grass, flowers, and some bark mulch. So for the building design features, just shown just what the siding would be, metal siding boards in a saddle. I'll just grab the pointer here. They've proposed charcoal gray metal siding panels, stone gray metal siding panels, and then there's some fir timber accents and column, which is in a natural stain. All windows would have black trim, and then all the doors are also metal black doors for the garage doors in the rear, and then the front doors at the commercial entrance. The stairs on the side would be steel entry stairs that would be finished in black, and then there's also black membrane roofing. So staff have done an evaluation of the development variance permit, and staff are supportive of the variance for a few of the following reasons. The proposed building and parking area is limited by the required size of the septic field. You'll see in this slide here where the septic bed is located, and the required size has pushed the building over. So the proposed variance does allow for a more suitable building form on the lot. It allows to have the proposed 3 units for commercial and residential on the top and bottom. If the variance is not supported or they need to meet the 6-meter setback, it would require potentially a reduction in the building size and changes to the parking and building layout. So the proposed building face also along the 3-meter setback that's been requested has only 1 window looking out across Nixon Road. So you can see that here in the image, which has the exterior stairs to the window. And the proposed building elevations, materials, massing, and landscaping do create a complementary relationship with the surrounding uses. And the building is adequately landscaped and screened from the existing residential properties, and staff do not feel that there would be a negative impact to adjacent properties. The proposed gravel surfacing is a recommendation in the applicant's geotechnical report. Staff have reviewed this with the development permit of the Big Eddy floodplain. And the geotechnical engineer does state that the parking area will accommodate up to 20 vehicles and is to remain unpaved so that rainwater and runoff will be transmitted through the subgrade soils. The proposed gravel surfacing will maintain a professional look and mitigate any dust and address all of the engineer's recommendations. This also does align with some of the OCP policies that state that the parking should reduce impervious surface area. So then getting into the development permit, which is for the form and character of the site and the building. So going into the form and character, staff are supportive of the development permit as it's proposed. As the proposed commercial residential development builds upon and projects a high quality image and character in the existing commercial, industrial, and residential neighborhood. And the proposed building does utilize materials and elements that create an aesthetically pleasing streetscape, and the building form fits the lot and has considered orientation as discussed of the windows and access to create less of an impact to the surrounding uses. And getting into the surrounding uses, those are, as discussed, the residential, there's public institutional, city-owned lot that butts the trail network there, commercial and industrial. And the proposed commercial residential development does fit in with the surrounding land uses. And as discussed, it's adequately landscaped and screened from the existing properties. And then as the applicants propose, the building orientation, massing, and design, such as the window placement, has completed to minimize impacts on adjacent properties. So as discussed, staff do not foresee any negative impacts to those adjacent residential properties. As outlined on the past slides, the landscaping, they have proposed both soft and hard landscaping. The OCP speaks to soft landscaping. The applicant has proposed additional hard landscaping as well, which would enhance the curb appeal of the subject property from the public roadway and neighboring properties, as the landscaping does create a space to break up the massing of the building. And the landscaping is proposed around the entire perimeter of the property, buildings, and parking areas, which would adequately screen the lot from all three roads, Law Road, Nixon Road, and Big Eddy Road. And the parking is proposed as shown in the site plan in the rear and the front of the property and is screened from all roadways. The garbage and recycling is also screened by, you'll see, in the rear of the lot. So there's screening of trees against Law Road here. So there should be no negative impacts on Law Road from the placement of the garbage and recycling units. So staff do recommend that the variance application be approved. And if council is supportive of the staff recommendation, the resolution on the screen in front of you can be considered. So the first resolution is to review the development variance as outlined in the report. If council is supportive of the development variance permit, then the second resolution with a development permit can then be considered. So I'll leave the first resolution up in front of you, and that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you, Ms. Hartley. Appreciate it. Council, is there a council that would like to put item number 1 on the motion for me? Councilor Charlotte.
Sure, the development variance permit DBP 2021-007 be approved at 1695 Nixon Road as on the screen for sections A, B, and C.
Great, thank you. Is there a second for the motion, please? Councilor Palmer, any discussion on the motion? Councilor Palmer, then Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I have a question regarding the accessibility. So you have the gravel path on the side yard, and sort of interlinking the back and the front. And then the parking lots, the front is gravel. Is all the parking gravel? Most of the parking is gravel. Can you maybe just point out what parts of the parking or roadway portions are paved? If any.
Ms. Hartley, any
Yeah.
comment?
Can you see the landscaping plan in front of you? Okay. Where my laser pointer is would be gravel parking and gravel parking in the rear. You can see it's this small portion where the bike parking is and the walkway that goes underneath the overhang of the building here. Well, the walkway would be paved, and then the gravel would be the remaining.
So, to the mayor, my concern is with the handicap parking. So are those stalls paved?
No, they're not.
They're not, okay. So that would be my concern, is accessibility. and not only on the parking itself, but how someone, a wheelchair, a walker, or whatever challenges they have, of, you know, how do they get in and out without having additional challenges of gravel surface. So it's I guess it's a point. I don't know what to do about that right now, but.
Any comments, Ms. Harling? Is that something that can be discussed with the proponent for access for people who would need to utilize a wheelchair or a walker, as Councillor Palmer's indicating? Just concerned about making sure that access to all people is available, and that's the concern here.
Yeah, through your worship, that is something that we can discuss with the applicant. They're not on the meeting today. I'm not sure if that's something that council, I might defer to Ms. Wade if council wants to put in an additional provision into the requested variance, or if that's something that you want to refer to building permit stage.
Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, so I'll just hold that for a moment. Kevin, maybe just in case there's some amendment or something, we capture everything and not piecemeal. So just a comment, or I guess a question regarding the windows on, if I was understanding you correctly, the windows facing onto, not Nixon, but there was the one side where there was just the one window. So that's facing that side, yes.
Nixon Road.
That's facing Nixon Road. And so
that's correct.
So if I was understanding the way the argument was that it was better without windows, and it's probably not a major issue here, but I would almost think it would look better with windows because you're taking away from bulk massing with windows in there. So, and I'm not sure why it would be a concern to neighboring properties, because you have the roads right there. And yes, I understand the setback's really small, but sort of the nature of that area. So just a comment, I guess, really on that.
Through your worship, did you want me to comment?
Regarding the window on the back?
Like it seems to me that if and it's more in favor of the developer, if they were allowed more windows on that side, it might just give them a little bit more flexibility and might be slightly nicer. And I don't see what the negative impact would be with more windows on that side.
Through your worship, I understand the applicant was trying to reduce with the building being closer to the council reviewed a variance to the building across Nixon Road for the rear yard setback. They are building a single family dwelling with a suite and across the road. I believe they're trying to reduce the impact of a taller building looking down into the neighboring yard. So they were reducing the window openings on that side to have the building facing out on Big Eddy Road and Law Road, where there's not as much of a view onto the residential properties.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a big issue. I would understand their rationale if it was a property line that was right next to the road there. I think that's all the comments I have, and I might put in an amendment regarding the accessibility. Okay. Comments.
Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Ali.
Just use, is it supposed to be a rental facility, the upper floor, or more condominium sales?
Ms. Harling, is this proposed to be rental accommodation?
Through your worship, yes, it would be rental accommodation. I believe the applicant does have an agreement going on title that requires it to be rental housing and not sold individual units, and the zoning only permits for monthly rentals. So it would either be monthly rentals, or if they were wanting to create an ownership, there would be a different process for them to take. So their plans are to do monthly rentals.
Great, thank you. Any further comments, Councillor Ali?
No, I think it's great. We're desperate for rental space, so I think it's a win. It's a relatively flat lot. The drainage plan that goes around it seems like we're moving towards gravel as an accepted means of managing the water. Is that a standard we're willing to accept, or is this with the geotech's recommendations alone, or what are we doing on this one?
Ms. Hartman?
Yeah, through your worship, it was a recommendation by the geotech, so that is why it was presented to us. The applicant in the future may want to pave more, but that may require the geotech to sign off on that. So it was very much so the geotechnical recommendation that pushed the applicant to apply for this variance. If they do want to pave more, then we may need to refer to the geotech to see if their recommendation is fine with partial paving, partial gravel. I'm not sure if Ms. Wade wants to weigh in on staff review on if this is something a standard changing with our reviews. If it's if some sort of gravel surfacing is just as acceptable as paving. That would be something with our zoning bylaw review.
Ms. Wade, do you want to weigh in at all?
Your worship, yeah, I'll just add to what Ms. Hartling said, is that that's one of the things we're looking at with our climate adaptation and sustainability as we move forward, is having less impervious and more pervious from a sustainability point of view.
Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Palmer?
A comment, and then I'll put in a suggested amendment. Through the chair, like on the gravel, that's for council. I think it's actually a fairly significant change that's going to have impact, and I really have to wrap my mind around it. I like the ideas on the sustainability, and yet it could lead to other conflicts with gravel going off. So I think we're already seeing that on Victoria with that. It's not, again, not a fair comparison. Well, maybe it is in some ways, of tracking of mud and stuff that when you don't have. But on the other hand, there is allowing rainwater recharge and all that kind of thing. I think there's other ways that could be addressed, because there is materials out there that do allow rainwater recharge through other that look like hard surfaces. For this one, I'm willing to say, well, let's see how this goes as far as the gravel. Getting back to the accessibility, I think this is where an exception, that exception doesn't apply, that we need to ensure. So I'll put an amendment, a motion to amend the motion to require the developer to address accessibility from the accessibility parking lot to the building entrance.
So just sort of one handicap parking spot,
There's
two. So for the handicap parking spot, some sort of hard surface that a wheelchair could be used on. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll repeat that for the minute taker.
Okay, Ms. Hartman, you've raised your hand here, so do you have something you want to say before we clarify what Councillor Palmer is asking for?
Yeah, just that there are two resolutions in front of you. So the first one is for the development variance permit for the surfacing standard. The next one you will be considering is for the development for the form and character. And the form and character for a development permit, council can put provisions in for certain characters at the site in the form and character. So I may refer to Ms. Wade or our CIO of what the best, just as a suggestion, it might be which one's more acceptable to put the standard in, is if it's in the variance or the development permit, if that's something that if council is in support of the variance. I'm not too sure which one's the best option.
So Ms. Hartman, when we look at section C, it says to vary the asphalt, concrete, or similar pavement requirement for surface parking areas for more than 4 vehicles to allow for gravel surfacing only. And I think that Councillor Palmer was wanting to ensure that the handicap parking spots had a hard surface in those areas. Ms. Wade, you've raised your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Ms. Hartling's question, I think the most appropriate place to put that amendment would actually be in the DP itself, and to put that a condition that the handicap spots be paved.
Okay, that's good. All right. Are you okay with that, Councillor Palmer?
Thank you for the comments, and I guess there's different perspectives. When I look at the resolution that's in front of us, sections 1C, to vary the asphalt, concrete, or similar pavement requirement for surface parking areas for more than 4 vehicles to allow for gravel surfacing only, I would like to stick with the amendment to add to C, with the exception of the handy or accessibility parking lots that must have hard surface to the building entrance. And the reason for it, so that's the motion. I'll speak to the motion after.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Charlotte? Do you want to speak to it, Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, so maybe there's a change that needs with the development permit or the next section, but it seems to me that it could lead to confusion, so I'm just trying to make sure that it's solid in one place. Is a reference there. So that's the motivation for wanting to put it in.
Thank you. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, I just think on the commercial front, a gravel parking lot doesn't have the same eye candy appeal as a polished retail outlet. So I just find the front, I have a difficult time without being paid. The back, I'm okay, that's more residential, but in and out traffic onto Big Eddy Road might be an issue with gravel tracking in and out and, pooling the water that goes on in a gravel pit. I think it might need to be addressed a little more.
Okay, Ms. Wade has her hand up there. I'm going to go to Councillor Charlotte. Ms. Wade?
Thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to clarify that the reason why the variance says 4 vehicles allowed, that is what is in our bylaw. So we're varying that bylaw. And so when it comes to the actual materials, which is form and character, that's in a development permit. That was why I gave the answer that I gave. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Charlotte?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, that makes sense as well, from Ms. Wade. I think the word that's catching me and the reason I seconded the amendment was the gravel surfacing only, to allow for gravel surfacing only though. So it doesn't mandate it, it just allows for it and opens that doorway in the variance in theory. That being said, it's a difficult balance to balance the climate action and having these changes to how we do things to avoid the paving the whole place. But also keeping in mind those accessibility issues. So I appreciate that Councillor Palmer brought that up because trying to bring wheels on gravel would be interesting. I am open to letting this happen here. It does sound like that's one of the solutions, or one of the solution might be the wrong term, but the mitigating efforts to try and deal with climate change. Like you said, there's concerns that might happen, Councillor Elliott, that we might very well have a big mess from this. So I would hope that we're watching and seeing if it's suitable and try to test things out before we make grand changes.
Any other comment, Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So through to Councillor Elliott, are you wanting to address that, the hard surface on the front? So like that could, because that could be addressed at this point as well. So I'm speaking still speaking to the amending resolution, but
I think some real thoughts should be put into the gravel at the front of the building.
Mayor Sulz, to the planner, did the APC, did they address the gravel stuff? Did they have much conversation on the gravel, or is there anything in on that?
Ms. Hartman?
Through your worship, there was not much discussion on the gravel. It was more the landscaping and the building form. So to answer your question, no, that wasn't really discussed much.
Okay, any other comments on the amended motion? Okay, I will ask the question. So we're talking about hard surface for the accessibility spots in addition to the gravel surfacing. So on this amendment, are you all in favor?
Just maybe, sorry, good question. Paving for the handicap parking at the back of the building doesn't seem to make sense if he's got a set of stairs to exit. That's residential parking.
So I thought we were doing it at the front of the building. Isn't that where the accessible parking is?
Handicap parking, there's one in the front and one in the back.
Okay,
So, I'm trying to make sense. If you pave the back and then he's got a climb set of stairs, it doesn't really make sense. So let's.
well, you're in a wheelchair, you're not climbing those stairs.
Exactly. So we're putting a stipulation to pave the handicap parking. It's got bolts turning back. Back doesn't make sense.
Okay. All right, so do we need to discuss this anymore? This way, do you have your hand up?
Sorry.
So your worship, I just wanted to clarify that the paving of the handicap spots would lead to the pathway would lead to the doors would lead into the building. So it works from to pave it. I certainly understand what that is. I just want to explain the flow. So the handicap is to access the ground level and then to get to the inside of the building from the inside, not the stairs on the outside.
So is it prudent to have, I guess I'll ask the question, is it prudent to have both parking spots, both handicap parking spots paved? People will still be able to get around the building, get into the building if they're in a wheelchair or have a walker.
Right, because the handicap spots are on the pathway of which a wheelchair could roll on. And I'm sorry, I'm having it. You break up quite a bit in there, so I'm sorry. I do miss some of the comments, so I apologize.
Okay, that's fine. So that makes it clear. So what Councillor Palmer is asking for is a prudent choice. So, okay, I'm going to now ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. So that amendment, hard surface for accessibility spots. Now I will ask the question on the development variance permit. Any further discussion on the development variance permit? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. So we're moving on to item number 2, the development permit. Does someone want to put that on the table for me, Councillor Charlotte?
The development permit DP 2021-005 be approved at 1695 Nixon Road as in the package.
Great, thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Burksville. Any discussion on this motion? Councillor Palmer.
So through to the Ms. Hartley, do we need to address the parking thing again in here, or is it adequate with what we've done?
Ms. Hartley, Ms. Wade, do you want to weigh in, or we accomplished what we wanted to do in the first motion?
Through your worship, technically speaking, the variance for the hard surface for the handicap should have been with the development permit, not with the DVP.
Okay, so I deferred to our CAO and he was comfortable with either spot. So do you want us to do that again in this, in the development permit, just to make sure we have our bases covered?
Through your worship, yes.
Okay. So Councillor Palmer, do you want to make that amendment again for this DP, please?
Yes, I'll do that. I'll defer to staff for the actual wording.
Okay, so staff, are you okay with the wording? You'll figure that out?
Yes,
Through your worship, yeah, you could just make a motion to say that the handicap accessible be paved.
Okay, so that's the motion. Again, accessible be paved. Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Charlotte. Any further discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor of that amendment, motion's carried unanimously. Now back to the development permit, approving for 1695 Nixon Road. Any further comments? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Great, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Ms. Hartley, Ms. Wade. Appreciate it. Moving on to item 6, announcements from the mayor. Just want to make the community well aware that there is a fire ban provincially At this point, in addition to that, our fire chief has issued a fire ban here in the city of Revelstoke. That means there will be no open burning unless it's a propane fire pit, propane barbecue, or briquette barbecue. Other than that, there will be no burning. That's to keep our community safe. In addition to that, we have year-round water restrictions. They're definitely important at this point. We don't want to go to a level 2 where we have to do hand watering only. So I just encourage people, if your address is in an even number, you can water on even days between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. only. And if you end up with a odd number, you can water on odd days, again, between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. only. You can hand water at any time, but hand watering means you hold the hose in your hand and you actually water your plants. You don't take the hose and set it on your grass and you walk away. That's not hand watering, and I've seen that happen in the past few weeks. So just want to let people know that. I've had many emails and phone conversations with community members quite concerned over what's happened in the Lytton area and concerned about how we move forward with egress, etc., from the community should there be a fire. Our emergency planning people have things in order. They will deal with that at the time. So we're not making a plan. I'm not going to tell you to head west because we may have a fire in the west. So we may need to head another direction. So we will deal with those things, but our planning people are definitely well-versed in this sort of thing. And our CAO has been well-versed in emergency services and whatnot in past years. So definitely we've got the community covered. And I just want to make sure that our residents know we're doing what we can to make you safe, and we'll notify you if we need to do anything. At this point, I'm grateful that we don't have any fires anywhere near our community. All right, we're going to move on to item 9, bylaws, development service building bylaw. Ms. Wade, you have a presentation.
Yes, Your Worship, I do. I'll try to share my screen with you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So we have before you today the building bylaw. Staff is very excited to get this forward as one of our major workload objectives. So staff is recommending that council consider first, second, and third reading of the bylaws. I just wanted to quickly review the background to date, that we have used a model building bylaw that has been developed by industry and lead professionals. We selected the medium-sized bylaw. This also is in relation to the energy step code and the commitments the city has made in regards to the climate action plan. We gave notice to the province in May 2020 that we would be moving forward with integrating step code into our building bylaw. And this has now been done within our building bylaw. We have presented updates to Committee of the Whole on March 11th and June 10th. And we also have addressed the recommendations that were made by the CAO in regards to staff making changes with temporary buildings, and that has been incorporated into this building bylaw as well. Just a high level, these proposed changes have already been before council and discussed. The step code, because we're trying to achieve step code 3 for part 9 buildings and step code 2 for part 3 buildings by 2021 to be aligned with provincial objectives. We have increased the reduction in building permit fees for certified professionals from 5% to 10%. We've had some parameters on time restrictions for open permits, and we've included something about swimming pools because we did not have that previously. In regards to the bylaw, I just wanted to highlight in section 10.57 to 6.60, we deal with temporary buildings and structures to address the motion that council made on June 22nd. And that's also been addressed in our zoning bylaw and official community plans, which will be coming before you at a later date. The industry engagement, we started the step code discussion in March 2019. The draft bylaws have been shared with the industry at our monthly builder developer meetings. We've gone back and forth. We've integrated comments, provided clarification, and been working with the industry on that. We posted this on Talk Revelstoke. As of the time the report was written for council, there was 11 clicks on the site. As of today, there's 20 clicks on the site. We've received no further comments from the public at all. And we have received the support of, the building industry through our meetings. So staff is recommending that council consider first, second, and third reading of the bylaws before you for the building bylaw. And I'm here to answer any questions. And I also have Mr. Bernie Zimmer here, who's been very much a part of this process since we started it.
Great, thank you. Council Palmer.
I move that building bylaw number 2294 be read at first, second, and third time.
Second for the motion, Councilor Elliott.
Just make a comment. So a good work on this bylaw. I think it's great. It's going to really help modernize and mitigate a number of problems. Like the idea that it's uniform with the rest of the province. I think that's really a big plus. And thank staff for addressing some of the concerns. I think it was in the whole we discussed that this was presented. It was really well done. So that's my comments.
Great. Councilor, any comments?
Just a quick question. I noticed that security deposit 10% of the building cost. Is that a new thing, or do we have that in place already?
Ms. Wade, do you want to weigh on that?
We do have some security deposits in place right now, primarily to do with deposits in regards of $2,000 for public damage to public areas. And then in the fees and charges bylaw, we'll have to update some of the security deposits in regards to that, because we just had a flat fee. And that was before council previously this year, but the fees and charges bylaw did not go forward.
Right. All right.
So just so I understand, so we pay our development permit fees, DP cost charges, and then a security deposit for the estimated building construction.
Is that how we're doing it, Ms. Wade? Do you want to clarify for us, please?
Yes, so to clarify, currently the deposit, security deposit is $2,000 flat fee, which has been in place for several years now and hasn't been updated with the cost of inflation or what it would cost to replace those damages on our lands. So that would be our public curbs, any damage to pipes, the roadways, etc., landscaping. And so the security deposit of 10% would be to be replaced by the 2,000 that's in the fees and charges bylaw now.
So we would be taking away the $2,000 flat fee and we would be instituting a 10% fee of the entire build project. Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct.
All right.
So I'm just, so build estimate $400,000 or $500,000 to build. 10% of that is $40,000, $50,000. You got to put that down as a deposit to get your building permit.
Is that how it works, Ms. Wade, or do we accept a letter of credit? How does that work?
Yes, they can do a letter of credit if they want it, but I just want to clarify that, it's always proportional to the size of construction and whether it's a part 3 or a part 9.
Okay. And so I'm going to ask for clarification on that part. So if I have a simple building, I'm building a garage in my backyard, it's going to cost me $25,000 or $30,000 or $40,000. I'm going to pay 10% on that. Is that what part does that fall under?
Yes, so that 10% would be 25,000. So what is that? 2,500. And that's just a security deposit to protect our asset, the city's asset, from damage. That's the point of it.
Okay, so if I'm building, what's a Part 9 building versus a regular building, just for clarity for the public, please?
Part 9 is a single family home, small, what they call simple. And Part 3 is a complex, so a multi-family like the Heli Hotel.
Okay, so if I'm building the Heli Hotel, I'm still going to pay the 10%. It doesn't matter, or is there a different pay scale on that?
It'd just be the 10%.
Okay, good. All right, that's Councilor Palmer.
So, Chair to Councilor Elliott, I think you have a valid point there. The concern is.
Well, I mean, money is crucial in a building game. If you're gonna give, say it's the construction costs are 50, 100,000, our housing prices right now are 700,000. Our cost of land is 3, building is 4 or 5, look at the type of houses that are being built. 10% of that is $50,000. Right, and that's a big chunk. If you're building your own home, putting $50,000 on top of your development cost charges is a significant hurdle to overcome. And I'm just saying, you've got your DCC charges plus your deposit on your building, and when you're trying to get your foundation in, that $50,000, you've got to give that to the city, and that's not your working capital anymore. So it's a tricky one.
Any comment, Mr. Matusi? I'm going to put you on the spot there.
I'm planning on building officially, Your Worship, but I'd ask, maybe Mr. Zimmer, if there are other examples where it's working on some form of a sliding scale. I mean, I can understand where.
You don't want to, jeopardize.
Yeah, exactly, and in the public realm, if you don't have a deposit, people could be long gone, and now it's up to the taxpayer to come and fix the curb or whatever. So there has to be some recourse, but and of course, the larger the project, the more chances you're moving through a larger area that you're dealing with. But the only question I would ask Mr. Zimmer, is there any other examples where there's some kind of sliding scale, there's a differentiation as opposed to the standard, 10%?
Great. So Ms. Wade, you have your hand up, so I'll ask you that question. Then I would like to go to Mr. Zimmer as well. I know that you've probably compared with other communities. Ms. Wade, do you want to weigh in, please?
Yes, thank you, Worship. I just want to note that what we're referring to in here also refers to our fees and charges bylaw. So it's not an automatic 10%. To Mr. Matusi's comment, in the proposed fees and charges bylaw changes that we brought before council that was defeated, there was an upset on those fees in there. And I can go back and get that. I just don't have it at my fingertips today. But to Mr. Matusi's point, we did consider that in the fees and charges bylaw. And that's why those were put forward in the fees and charges bylaw. And we did that based on comparing to other municipalities. And the 10% is a standard because that's what MAIBC, Lidstone, and the BOABC did in their comparison in doing the templates. So I'm sorry I didn't have that answer previously for Mr. Elliott, but that is what we did in the proposed fees and charges bylaws, put an upset fee on it.
Okay, and so the upset fee, is there an amount that where it stops, where we're not putting undue hardship on somebody who's building their own home versus a large construction company?
Yes, we looked at that proportionally, and I'm sorry, Your Worship, I just don't have that here. I'd have to pull up the proposed amending bylaws that we brought before council back in, when was that? January, February?
Yes,
So,
Jenny.
yeah, but that has been considered.
Okay, so does that answer your question sufficiently, Councillor Elliott?
I'm just wondering what the implications, going from 2,000 to 40,000 is a big security. I mean, the city's definitely got you by a very, very tight rein on this, or I think it seems excessive to me.
Mr. Zimmer, are you still on the meeting? I'm just
Hello?
wondering if Mr. Zimmer's there and could give some opinion as to what he's seen in other communities versus a sliding scale, that sort of thing. Or is that kind of sort of thing in the fees and charges bylaw will come to us again? And we're not going to put undue hardship, Ms. Wade, on our builders who are strapped for money that's disposable. I see you have your hand up again.
Yeah, so through your worship, what I would propose that I do is I'll find what we did in the proposed fees and charges bylaw, and I'm happy to make that available to council for distribution so that you're aware of what it is. And if you want, we could bring it back as a point for when you consider adoption of the bylaws.
Okay, that works for us. Yeah, Councilor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I'm satisfied with the planner's explanation there. It does state in section 10.8 and in other places as well, a direct reference to our city's fees and charges bylaws, which is typically updated on an annual basis. So I'm satisfied.
That's Ms. Wade's explanation. You're comfortable with that? Yep. Sorry.
No, it's all good. In the council report, the third change that's being proposed is about reducing the fee for building permits. And I'm curious, it says that it's reduced, which will reduce the building official's inspection time and ensure compliance with the building code. Is it just oversight that gets reduced, or is there also a liability component that's taken off the city because it's outsourced to a professional?
Want to weigh in on that, Ms. Wade, regarding liability, et cetera?
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, so the point of that is that in our review of other municipalities, that when you have what they call a letter of assurance by a certified professional, which is a Schedule A, then that Schedule A becomes the coordinating professional who does take on liability for a complex build, and as such does the field reports and inspections, and there's a reduced time on our staff. So they have increased those fees so that there's some compensation because we don't have to send staff out, and the liability is with the certified professional.
So it's both, it's liability and time.
Yes.
Sweet.
You're comfortable with that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Any further comments, councillors, on the motion on the table? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Wade. I appreciate this. Appreciate your time and your staff's time in getting this work done. It's kind of nice to see this building bylaw come to fruition, and we look forward to seeing it put in place as we approve it. Moving on. We're going to move on to 11A, staff reports, Community Economic Development, Revitalization Fund grant application. So Ms. Braun, you're here. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so this grant application is intended to give the opportunity to Development Services to apply for additional funds to augment and to match the funds received previously from the Community Columbia Basin Trust for Grizzly Plaza revitalizations. I've consulted with Ms. Wade on this project and used a lot of her verbiage from her original report to council when she did apply for the CBT funds for this, so that we did not miss an opportunity to get working on this grant application, which is due at the end of this month. So essentially, the original scope document that Development Services put together for this project came in about $750,000. We received $322,000 from the Columbia Basin Trust, and it requires that the city match that with $107,000. And this infrastructure grant, if we were able to obtain additional funds, would provide that matching amount, as well as the another up to $320,000 to complete the full refurbishment that was initially scoped out by the project consultants. If there are any questions, I would defer them to Ms. Wade, but essentially this was just an opportunity to match funding that she had already obtained for this important project, especially for components of the project like engagement and engineering specs, design documents that were not covered in the original proposal. So if there's any questions, I can answer them, or I would likely refer to Ms. Wade.
All right, so the motion on the table. Councillor Ryan.
That an application be submitted to the Canada Community Revitalization Grant Program for funding to support key municipal infrastructure upgrades to Grizzly Plaza.
Second for the motion, Councillor Elliott. Any further discussion on the motion? It's a great opportunity to get more funding, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. Braun, for that. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item B, active transportation grant funding application. You want to weigh in on that, Ms. Braun?
Yes, again, just taking advantage of the opportunity for funds with a very tight turnaround. In this case, this application is due July 23rd. And again, as we know, last week, both Director Wade and Director Black were away on vacation. So they will write the applications for funding. I'm just essentially writing the report and bringing it to council's attention because I had, because I was here. So this active transportation grant funding would basically build on the active transportation grant or active transportation planning that was done in 2010. It also aligns with our resort development strategy and our, right now we're developing a master transportation plan. So it'll tie into all of these, but provide additional infrastructure funding to, again, match projects we have currently underway. So to date, if you scroll down through the report, we have been able to obtain infrastructure grant monies through the SARET project, through the Tours Independent Community project, as well as we have some funds set aside in the Resort Municipality Initiative project. And we have a fourth funding application in that we will hear back from the province soon, I believe early September. So the funding we've brought in for refurbishing the Greenbelt trails, as well as developing the multi-use trails connecting the resort to our downtown is short. We can always use some more funds to be able to cover the full kilometers that were planned to be repaved and connected. And I believe Darren Komanowski is on the call as well and can speak to more specifics about where we are short and what we would need to move this project forward.
Do you want to weigh in, Mr. Komanowski, before I put the motion on the table?
I could, Your Worship. There is another report coming later to explain that, but I could do it now if you wish.
Okay, let me get this motion on the table and then we can talk about it. Councillor Ryan.
That applications be submitted to the Active Transportation Grant Program for funding to support expansion and upgrading of the Greenbelt Trail network and planned multi-use pathways.
Second for the motion, please, Councillor Elliott. Now, having said that, any questions for Mr. Komanowski, Councillor Ryan?
Yeah, I'm not sure who it should be directed to, but in the report under the infrastructure grant priorities, it does say that this does not include additional costs to provide lighting, furniture, wayfinding signage, and other amenities along the Greenbelt Trail estimated at $150,000 to $200,000. Are those costs going to be covered by wayfinding at all?
The signage would be, through your worship, but not necessarily the furniture. So, benches, additional picnic tables, that kind of thing. So this additional grant opportunity would, if we attain the whole amount we're asking for, would allow us to complete the full refurbishment of the Greenbelt. And Darren will speak to that further down on the agenda, I believe, and would also give us some additional funds to provide that street furniture and those other amenities.
Okay, so I'm going to talk just a little bit about furniture. We have a program here in the community. It's memorial furniture. Most of the furniture, all of the furniture that's out there now is in memory of a loved one. That's free to the city because somebody buys that, purchases it, has that for 20 years. And so that's in place. So we look at that, and if you walk along and see any of those pieces of furniture, they have bronze plate on them. And so that is cared for. So for most of those things, every once in a while, we do have to put a picnic table in or a bench in, and then someone will come along and actually memorialize that, and we'll put a plate on it, so there'll be recouped for money on that, and for the most of it. Okay. Just want you to be aware of that. Okay, Mr. Komanowski, any further comments, or do you want to weigh in on that, on anything else regarding this motion?
No, Your Worship, I'm good at this point. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Elliott.
I'm not able to open the document here, but Is there a comprehensive plan? Where's the Greenbelt Trail? Does it want to go into some new areas along the Sulz there or?
So any comments on that, Mr. Kamenowski, regarding extension of the Greenbelt Trail? Is it going to be going into new areas or what's happening with that at this point?
Your worship, no, we will be just going, the proposed project that we did put out to tender was from the Sulz Bridge into Columbia Park under the Trans-Canada Highway Bridge.
So basically where we're at now?
Yeah, we're paved right now, your worship, yes.
Yep.
With this resurfacing,
We've had some problems with tree roots and whatnot, especially near the Sulz Bridge. Some of that stuff has been dealt with already, but it's resurfacing some of the other that's wearing out.
but from the Sulz Bridge to right by the arena there, it's pretty good shape. It's a pathway.
Well, it didn't take long to eat up this money.
That's
You know, you're talking about hard services, so.
okay. Yeah.
All right, is that it, Council comment?
Yeah, through the near to Darren. Mr. Kamenowski, so just regarding the resurfacing, some of those areas, like they were paved 10 years ago or whatever, and then wasn't long after the tree roots were pushing them up. And it's sounding like this is just resurfacing. We're not really addressing the road, but essentially the road base underneath. And maybe this is more for your report later on, but I'm just sort of wondering if we're doing the cosmetic part and not really getting into the engineering part of it.
Your worship, we will be getting into the engineering part. A lot of it is reconstruction, doing some of the sub base, and then as well doing root barrier, running it laterally to the where the trees are heavier to prevent these roots from coming in to the asphalt surface. So we will be doing, especially from, I'll say, Centennial Park into Columbia Park. A lot of that will be a lot of reconstruction in there. And then from Centennial Park to Sulz River, it's more just overlay. And a lot of that asphalt now is at a state that it needs to be overlaid. If you don't overlay it, you'll be looking at doing a whole new surface.
Okay, thanks for your question, Councilor. Okay. Councilor Elliott, any further questions? Council, any further questions? All right, so I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Braun, Mr. Kamenowski. Going to move on to item C, development agreement, golf course phase 2. Ms. Wade, you have a presentation.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, Your Worship. Just give me 1 second to share my screen.
Okay.
There. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is that not the one? Golf course phase 2?
Yep. So golf course phase 2, this is the development agreement.
We see the agenda. Not a presentation, right, sir?
Sorry, Ms. Wade, your presentation isn't showing.
Okay, let's try again.
Just because it says golf.
Okay,
Yes.
can you see it now?
Nope, still not.
Still not.
Now we see all the different cameras turned off now at least.
Okay,
We're getting there.
okay. Let's try
Try one.
again.
It's very thick, maybe it's taking a while.
Yeah, it could
I
be.
know.
It is a big document.
There.
Hmm.
Can you see it now or not?
No,
It's still not going.
Oh, wow.
There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Now you got near the end. That was the surprise slide.
we're at the back end of it.
Yeah. Now we're at the beginning.
Okay, awesome.
Oh, technical challenges. There we go. Okay. So here we are. We've got the phase 2 of the RMR golf course. We're very excited to bring this forward. We have been working very diligently with RMR over the last year to get a coordinated approach to development of their lands to align with their revised master development agreement and their business plans so that we can be much more coordinated in how we move forward in the development process with them. So what we've done is we've been working with RMR to move forward with a sequencing and development so that we can basically isolate development pods and then work through those development pods in an orderly manner, dealing with past deficiencies, the requirements in the bylaws, requirements in the master development agreement with the province, and have an orderly way of moving forward. So what we're doing is that we are going to be consolidating and redividing the lands that will align with the actual master development agreement and our CD8 zoning and our development permits that are associated with them. And then when we redivide, there'll be a no build put on those lands. And then there'll be conditions to be met prior to releasing that no build. And that is a condition of their subdivision, which is with us right now and current. And then what will happen is the development agreements will then correspond with that development permit and the development of that site in accordance with the zoning. So what we're talking about today is a development agreement that will be associated with all the lands that are in green. And then on lot 13, that will be the driving range. So these are the lands that will be under the development agreement that is before you today. And this is also associated with the development permit for the golf course lands, which will be coming after this presentation. So just an overview of what the development agreement is. We've already done 2 of those. One was for the Heli Hotel and the other was for phase 1 of the golf course. And this is our next development agreement. And it is to manage the construction of the golf course and to monitor the golf course construction so that aligns with city bylaws and policies. The RMR has applied for their development permit, which will be preceding this presentation, and that these golf course lands are in development permit areas, in particular that they are in environmentally sensitive and hazardous areas, which are required and subject to prior conditions of approval with the province and the federal agencies, and that falls under our riparian area regulations and the Water Sustainability Act. As part of our construction and monitoring and approval, qualified environmental professional, Cascade Environmental, has been hired as a third party. They've been retained by the city to oversee the plans and provide comments as we go through the approval process. And as we go into the construction process, they will be monitoring the construction for alignment with federal, provincial, and also city bylaws. Part of these conditions is there will be an integrated pesticide management plan and the cabinet management environmental management plans, and they're all attached to this agreement. So it's clearly laid out how we move forward with construction. In addition of the golf course, there's a number of infrastructure projects that have to take place. You've already had the Camosi roundabout and those agreements before you, that they are also attached to this development agreement because the golf course lands are affected by those infrastructure works. So they're also coordinated into this development agreement. The works and services are attached for that. And also we're dealing with phase 1 of the multi-use trail, which is the Valley Trail, as Mr. Black or Director Black likes to refer to it as. And these are all attached in this document, so we clearly understand what pieces are in place as we build out the golf course to its fruition. In addition, we have parkland dedication, which is triggered through subdivision. We have a running Section 219 on the lands that will actually it'll calculate what we need for parkland. And when that commitment is met by RMR, we did that with the phase 1. For the initial phase, that was a remnant of this requirement from historic subdivisions. And now we'll have a running table for parkland dedication as we move through development to make sure that the 5% under the LGA is met. So what we've done is outlined, I just wanted to, for council to understand our process for how we move forward now with RMR, which we've agreed to with RMR. Both documents, both the no build and the development agreement have been executed by RMR. And so basically what we did is we started with the consolidation and redivision of the RMR lands so that we actually have clear development pods that matches their MDA and our CD zoning. There's a no build put on the lands. Then they apply for a DP for their lands. They prepare and execute a development agreement. It comes to council for approval for the DA to be have a resolution for the mayor and the CAO to sign it. And then after we get that, we discharge the no build and we go into BP issuance and construction. So we've outlined a very clear framework on how we move forward with development in a very orderly, coordinated manner. And as we move through the development pods, if there's any association with deficiencies, historical deficiencies, they are being accounted for, and a works and service agreement put in place so that we make sure that those works are addressed that have been historical issues. So what staff is asking today is for that the mayor and the chief administration officer be authorized to execute the development agreement with Revelstoke Mountain Resort Limited Partnership, general partner for the works required by the developer for the city to consider the issuance of a development permit for phase 2 of the golf course and then to construct and install the works for the benefit of the city. This is the same resolution we had before you from phase 1. Of the development of the golf course as well and that development agreement. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, so let's get this motion on the table and we can ask questions. Councillor Brooks Hill.
That the mayor and chief administration officer be authorized to execute the development agreement with Revelstoke Mountain Resort Limited Partnership, general partner for the works required by the developer for the city to consider the issuance of a development permit for phase 2 of the golf course and to then construct and install the works for the benefit of the city.
Second for the motion, please. Councillor. Excited about getting this done. Okay, any questions for Ms. Wade regarding this? I just, Ms. Wade, I'm going to make a comment about your sequencing and how you've worked that out with RMR. It's clean and it spells out how things are going to be done. It's definitely a benefit for the community, for us around this council table, and I'm sure for RMR. So I'm appreciative of that. Any other comments or questions, councillors? Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So my only sort of concern is, so there's 261 pages on this report and there's 246 on the next report we're going to be looking at. And I haven't read through them their entirety. And so I guess, you know, it looks good, and certainly development that we want to see for our community. And if there's little things in there later, how do we address those things? So for example, the Valley Trail thing, I haven't looked at that. I know there's been comments from the public on that and on alignment and stuff like that. And I'm not asking about reinventing the whole thing, but it's just if there's little tweaks, how do those things get addressed?
Great. Ms. Wade, do you want to comment on that when we're talking about these agreements? Is there the ability to tweak things if community or council finds that there's a problem as we move forward?
Yes, Your Worship. We can always, we're open to doing revisions on this in consultation with RMR, so that can definitely happen. I did want to just identify that a lot of the pages that are there, like the works and services agreement, is the roundabout, and that was already brought forward to council as part of the roundabout cost sharing agreement. So a lot of that is duplication, but we have to attach it to this development agreement. Regarding the Valley Trail, there's different sections of the Valley Trail. This one, which we call Phase 1, which I've worked with Director Black on, as well as Director Donato and Director Braun on, is the one that is the obligation for RMR to build on behalf of the city. Then there's another second phase, which is different, which is another program that we have a different arrangement on. So this is just strictly to do with what their obligation is for the city.
That answer your question, Councillor Palmer? Any comment, Mr. McCarthy?
First, I just want to commend Ms. Wade. It's a very comprehensive, very comprehensive agreement that I know it's taken an awful long time to get through. I think the proof is that, you know, the parties are coming together and getting this done and agreeing. And I know certainly, no doubt that you know, Ms. Wade, Mr. Black, supporting the engineering side of it, really looked after the public interest. And I think the most important thing for council to consider are the big chunks there. You know, the overall development agreements, you know, the environmental issues, they're going to be dealt with. You know, the pesticides are going to be dealt with, and I think those all are in place. And so, again, I just want to commend staff. It's a very, very thorough, very large development agreement, but I think it's also very fragile environment. It's a very complex type of development. And so this is not, there's nothing simple about this, and it's one that's been going on for a while as well. So there's issues that have to be dealt with and will continue over time, but I think it's a good framework. And again, just want to say thanks.
Great, thank you, Mr. Matusi. Any other comments, councillors? I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you again, Ms. Wade. We're going to move on to 11D. I know that I'm getting you and Mr. Simon and Ms. Hartling to move things about here, but we go on to item 11D, development permit, Camosi Road, McGinnis Road, in the protection for the environment, etc. So, Mr. Simon, you have a presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I do. Again, I have it up on the screen here. If anyone has any issues seeing it, please let me know and we will get those technical issues dealt with. So in addition
we don't have it on the screen, Mr. Simon, we just see your initials right now. I'm seeing it in my computer, but I'm not seeing it on our TV screen.
Okay, let me stop sharing and then I'll try sharing again. Okay, can council see that now?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, no problem. So the development permit application that is before council today, again, is in addition to the previous presentation that Ms. Wade just completed. This is for the Revelstoke Mountain Resort Phase 2 golf course construction. So staff are recommending approval. Again, I'm happy you guys don't have to read these resolutions out word for word because this is a very long resolution. But what you are getting here is a resolution that is recommending approval of the development permit, but withholding issuance of it. So there are conditions that are precedent to issuance, is how they were referred to, that need to be met before the permit is issued that allows for construction. And in a nutshell, what those conditions are approvals from the appropriate provincial and federal agencies with respect to the riparian area protection regulation, the Water Sustainability Act, as well as other regulations such as the Fisheries Act. And all these requirements need to be met. The reports will be finalized as they are approved by the province, and they will ultimately be appended into the permit. So we can start delving into this a little bit more. So a little bit of background, discussion on the proposal overview, and then get into the policy direction and conclude again with reiterating the staff recommendation. So the golf course, as previously indicated, is quite a substantial project. It includes 8 properties that are adjacent to Nickel Road, Camosi Road, and Airport Way. Total, it's about 140 hectares of land, so about 341 acres. Again, quite substantial. It is a complex area with respect to environmental sensitivities, and it does fall within both our environmentally sensitive and hazardous development permit areas. So that would be development permit area J and development permit area H, which is the Revelstoke Mountain Resort DP area. Zone Comprehensive Development Zone 8, property is surrounded by residential and resort properties. And phase 1 for the clearing and grubbing was previously presented to council. It was approved on May 12th, 2020. And again, there were those precedent to issuance conditions with respect to the environmental approvals that were required. And since that time, staff have been working very closely with the applicant as well as the provincial authorities to secure these approvals. And as such, we are comfortable moving on to phase 2 to bring this to a conclusion as we are nearing the end of getting those approvals. So a little bit of an overview of the proposal. It does include construction of the golf course. In support of this, the applicant has submitted an overall golf course plan, including details related to grading, shaping, and landscaping of the golf course, stormwater, irrigation, and integrated pesticide management plan, as well as what we're referring to as Cabot's environmental management plan for the protection and mitigation of any impact on the riparian areas. Very, very critical here, and we'll go into a little bit more detail later on, but this environmental management plan, which does outline obligations for overall monitoring. So for instance, water quality monitoring, which is a major concern of both staff and the community for Williamson Lake. There's going to be 10 separate areas for surface water collection monitoring. Reports will be completed all the way from pre-harvesting stage to post-construction stage that staff will be involved with, and we can get into some more details on those later. So again, the permit is dealing specifically with the grading, shaping, water crossings, landscaping, and protection of the riparian areas, pesticide and fertilizer management plans, and water quality monitoring. So where we are at now is a little bit more extensive and a little bit more comprehensive than where we're at with phase 1, which phase 1 was originally intended just to be the clearing and grubbing. Now we are really at the second phase of this project where it will be construction of the golf course itself. So proposed construction works do require approvals under the Riparian Area Protection Regulation and the Water Sustainability Act, as previously indicated. Very important for council to understand here, a separate development permit will be required in the future for any buildings. So this is for the construction of the golf course, the fairways, the greens, all those components of it. When you're thinking clubhouses, other types of golf course related amenities and those buildings that come with it, a separate development permit will be required for those that will ultimately be submitted to the city at a later date. And again, very, very key, as Ms. Wade had indicated, city doesn't have a qualified environmental professional on staff. So Ms. Wade and the team have been working with both the applicant and Cascade Environmental to secure the services of a qualified third-party review for the environmental monitoring plans, golf course plans, and then as well, and very critically important, the implementation of those plans as we work to ensure that all construction activities are done adhering to provincial legislation as well as best practices. So when we look at the policy direction that staff get for an application of this nature, we do need to refer to the official community plan. Specifically, we'd be looking at development permit area H, which is the resort lands. So lands within this development permit area for everything do require a permit and are required to abide by Appendix 2, which is a comprehensive overview of the Revelstoke Mountain Resort development process that's contained within the OCP. So when we look at, well, what are the key things that are in Appendix 2 that are important for council to be aware of? We have kind of guiding principles that provide an overview of how development will ultimately unfold at the resort. So we look at policies and regulations to ensure managed and monitored growth. We look at opportunities for expanding recreational and cultural elements, as well as very critically protection and enhancement of the natural environment. When we look at Section 5 of Appendix 2 of the OCP, again, which provides an overview of how development at RMR will occur, this is where we get into kind of the meat of the policies that give us authority under the development permit to require additional things like water quality monitoring. So this is the policy and land use directions to guide development. So some of the key policies in here look at providing for an all-season destination resort. So obviously construction of a golf course does contribute to this. It is outlined in the master development plan with the province that RMR does have, and it is looking at turning RMR aside from just being a winter destination to an all-season destination now. So again, that includes alternate development forms to accommodate recreational opportunities. Golfing is one of those activities. And then again, very critically important, and what the focus of this permit is protection of the natural environment and additional enhancement measures. So the beefy development permit that Councillor Palmer was referring to previously is quite extensive, but there's a reason to that. So what we have in that development permit, again, to ensure that the policies that are contained within the OCP are adhered to, is we have a copy of the riparian area regulation report that the applicant had provided to the province, another copy of the Water Sustainability Act report that again was provided to the province, as well as the Cabot Environmental Management Plan that was all submitted to address these policies, and in addition, the Integrated Pesticide Management Plan. So all these ultimately form the appendices within the development permit to both give the city, our qualified third-party environmental reviewer, as well as the province, the comfort that these policies will be adhered to as construction of the golf course does continue and ultimately commence. So again, to conclude with the staff recommendation, we are recommending to approve the development permit, but very, very key is that we have the conditions that are precedent to issuance being met, that the approval from the province for the riparian area protection regulation report be provided, and that final approved report would be appended into the development permit. Again, that approvals under the Water Sustainability Act, which have to do with changes in and about a stream, are provided by the province. And again, critically important that that final report is appended to the permit. We need confirmation from Fisheries Oceans Canada with respect to any approvals that are required with respect to any impact on fish habitat. Alternatively, the applicant can provide confirmation that Fisheries Oceans Canada has confirmed that no approvals under their jurisdiction is required and that they have deferred to the province. We'll be looking at a Section 219 covenant, which Ms. Wade had previously discussed. We have a lot of these elements outlined in the development agreement. And then lastly, and very critically important, is the environmental management plan. If there's any revisions that are required based on the final provincial reviews that need to be embedded into this plan, as well as any other changes to ensure adherence to best practices, that amended environmental management plan would be appended into the development permit. And once all these conditions are met, then staff would be able to ultimately issue this permit that would authorize the construction. Thank you. This concludes the presentation. And if you have any questions, myself and Ms. Wade are here to answer.
Hey, Mr. Sulz, I'd like to get this motion on the table. Councilor Palmer.
I'll put the motion on the table as written on the screen.
Great, thank you. Seconder, please. Councilor Sherlett. Any discussion on the motion, Councilor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. One of the concerns I've had with this was kind of the chicken and egg, whether we should be waiting for the feds and the province on their feedback, but I think it's covered fairly well. I suppose a question on that is if there is substantially anything different. I think the wording allows it within this resolution, so that's a question to staff that if there was anything different that the federal government was coming out.
Okay, any comments, Mr. Simon, if the federal government wants things changed or they have different amendments?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, most definitely, if there's going to be changes, then yeah, we need to make sure that those changes are reflected in the final permit that the city ultimately issues. I will say staff are very confident at this stage that any changes would be very minor and wouldn't be something that would be required to come back to council. Staff have been in very close contact and communication with both the applicant as well as the provincial review authorities. And as indicated earlier, because they are really at the back end of that process and securing their provincial approvals, staff are comfortable bringing this forward with the precedent issuance conditions being met and are confident that if any changes are required from the province, that they would be very, very minor, and there's the potential that they wouldn't even impact the environmental management plan.
Okay, thank you. And a second question through the chair. So on the qualified environmental professional, the QEP, so the city's retaining that. I think there was some discussion about working with the developer, but the QEP is reporting directly to the city. Is that where they're? And I'm just trying to mitigate any or understand any possible conflicts with the developer, but does the QEP, are they answerable to the city? Obviously within the scope of their professional responsibilities.
Mr. Simon, Ms. Wade, Mr. Simon go first, and then Ms. Wade.
So through your worship, Mr. Palmer, you are correct. They are reporting to the city. So I will note that Revelstoke Mountain Resort does have a QEP on staff, but because they are on staff, we wanted to make sure that we had secured the services of a third-party qualified environmental professional to ensure the validity and credibility of the review process, to make sure that it was very robust. And I will also note for council and for the community, within that environmental management plan that is so critical, it's such a critical addition to this development permit, there are actual specifications in there that allow the city's third-party reviewer as well as the city to halt operations should there be any issues with respect to the development conforming to both local, provincial, or federal regulations. So the QEP that the city has retained will be answering to the city and will be working with the city on this project. And again, we are quite confident that the ability of the city to have, you know, quite a bit of oversight in the construction activities will result in a really coordinated process to facilitate this construction and make sure it is done in a respectful way with any environmental sensitivities on the lands. And I don't know if Ms. Wade has anything that she would like to add on to that.
Ms. Wade.
No, I just like to summarize it by saying that because we do not have a qualified environmental professional on staff, we've gone third party, and those fees would be paid for by RMR as part of the development agreement. And that we've been working to ensure that the monitoring of the construction of the golf course, and then after it's into operation, that there is a monitoring program in place to address many of the community concerns that we've heard, in particular with water quality and fishes. So we feel we've addressed what we've heard so far.
Great. And then my third point or question is on the parcel that's adjacent to Williamson Lake, across from the park. Yeah, let me get oriented. So just looking for the protection of or long-term plans for, you know, people talk about the loop, people already sort of go around the lake, especially to the north, I guess it is. Is there anything, any comment on that, sort of that the lands adjacent to the lake and impacts that the golf course might have on that?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, the watershed area is being addressed in the Cabot management plans as far as water quality sampling in regards to the water that goes into Williamson Lake. And that is part of the monitoring program. And if you're talking about people walking around the lake, there's not a continuous loop around Williamson Lake yet, because the area that is not shaded is not owned by RMR. It's a different landowner. And so the city only has certain pieces that are associated with Williamson Lake, what I would call the edge around it.
So through the chair, so specifically I'm talking about that long term, so in visualizing how the public gets maximum access and enjoyment from that asset, Williamson Lake. And so is that being addressed as far as, like, I understand there is a parcel there, another parcel that isn't there, but hopefully in the future we have access, you know, a way to get into agreements with that so that someday there is a loop all the way around the lake, or at least maximizing the potential for that. I'm just wondering if it's addressed in the golf course lands at all.
So through your worship to Councillor Palmer, in the development agreement under the dedicated Parkland, there is a map in there showing the future dedication of lands that will expand the area around Williamson Lake as part of RMR's 5% contribution to Parkland.
Any further comments, questions, Councillor Ali?
So the ultimate jurisdiction is resting with the Ministry of Lands, Forests, and their responsible resort development branch. They govern management strategy, riparian access, the fisheries, Department of Federal Aids, those guys are involved. All the standards that are there are mandated by the higher levels of government.
Correct.
And we're just ensuring that we get access to, or they've been done. Is that what I'm understanding?
We're making sure that they're following through, that everything that needs to be done is being done.
So ultimately, the province and the resort development branch, they're culpable. If they fall through the cracks, they're the first authority. Is that right? And we're just sort of adding, this is to appease the community, but basically this is the province's jurisdiction as a resort oversight to govern this instance. Is that right?
So, Mr. Simon, from a planner's perspective, the liability on this sort of thing lies with the higher levels of government because of their riparian area, that sort of thing.
To your worship, the city does have a responsibility under the Riparian Areas Protection Regulation to ensure that the proper approvals are provided by the province. And that's exactly what this permit is doing. Now, local city bylaws in this circumstance, mainly being the official community plan, have substantial provisions to ensure that environmental enhancement measures are undertaken as the resort develops. It is a complex environmental area. And that is why the city has been working adamantly with the developer as well as the province to ensure that the environmental management plan is robust and not only ensures adherence to provincial and federal regulations, but also the goals and policies of the city's official community plan that look to preserve and enhance the environment as part of this development. So it's a multi-jurisdictional approval that is ultimately required. And I would say that, yes, the province does have quite a substantial role to play in terms of granting those approvals, but it does not negate the role that the municipality has under our provisions of the official community plan. And we are very confident that this approval and the plans that we've been working with the applicant and our third-party environmental reviewer on are going to satisfy and go above and beyond our official community plan.
So the environmental management plan, that is the city mandated, what will be included in that, or is that a province mandated requirement?
Through your worship, there are items in the environmental management plan that would overlap with the areas where the province has jurisdiction, such as the Water Sustainability Act approvals and riparian area protection regulation. But that management plan is done in effort to not only address the provincial requirements, but as well as the municipal requirements as outlined in the official community plan. There is inevitably going to be overlap between what the city is going to require and what the province is going to require. That's kind of the nature of working with multiple levels of government. But we've tried to work with the applicant and coordinate with the province to ensure that it is a streamlined, coordinated process where we were reducing duplication as much as we can on this.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to get to. Duplication, the overstepping authority and clouding the issue, clouding progress by adding complications.
Great. All right, Ms. Ward.
Yes, Your Worship, I just wanted to add, it's important to note that with the Riparian Assessment and Water Sustainability Act, there was a delegation down to municipalities, and it's something that we need to address in our OCP, that we have a responsibility to ensure that those approvals are received from those provincial jurisdictions, but we also have a responsibility to have a management plan and have a QEP oversee that to ensure that there's an alignment, and that responsibility lies with ourselves, and that's why we have a management plan and an agreement with the RMR so that we can make sure that we're following through with what our obligations are that have been delegated down to a municipality.
Great, thank you. Any further comments from councilors? Council Palmer.
Another question, Mayor Sulz. On this development permit is being issued to Revelstoke Alpine Village Limited, I believe, incorporated, whereas the previous was to RMR Limited Partnership. Can you just explain these two legal entities? Why is there two different entities?
You want to just weigh in on the different companies that are doing these projects?
To your worship, and Ms. Wade may have something to add on to this. With the development permit, we always go based on what's on title. With the development agreement, I do believe that they are one of the same. Again, it is a complex organization with Revelstoke Mountain Resort, but the development permit, we go based on what's on title, and the development agreement might be a little bit more all-encompassing to incorporate a different element of the ownership as well. Ms. Wade may have something to add on to that.
Anything further, Ms. Wade?
Yeah, through your worship, yes, Mr. Simon's correct. And the development agreement is with more the development authority, and then the legal entity of the company that RMR wishes to use for a development agreement in that legal scenario. And Mr. Simon is correct that when it comes to the development permit application, the development permit application is made by a different arm of the company, and that's where it runs with the development. They have various companies that we work with, and so Mr. Simon's correct, but there is a development company that's with the development authority, different partnership, different name, and then we've got the land ownership and where these lands fall into on legal title.
Any further comment, Councilor Palmer? Okay, thank you. Councilor Early, you have a question?
Councilor Palmer mentioned the land across the lake from the park. The parcel that's, I mean, is there some city land in there? There's two parcels, I think. One belongs to Jack McKinnon, and I think the next parcel might be city land. So I'm just not 100%.
Any comment on that, Mr. Simon, as to whether we own any property in there?
Through your worship, we would have to check the land titles to see who the ownership ultimately falls under. I mean, I think the focus for this application is looking at the golf course lands. I understand these lands kind of fall in the middle of them, but we'd have to double check the ownership on the title to see who it ultimately falls under.
Yeah, just related to a trail around the lake, we're also looking at another land parcel south of there, and it might relate. So thank you.
All right, any further comments on the motion on the table? Seeing none, I will ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you again. So Mr. Simon, Ms. Wade, I want to thank you both for the time and commitment you've put in with this, especially in the work with the Revelstoke Mountain Resort. Much appreciated, and it's great to see this moving forward. So thank you again. Mr. Matusi, any comments?
No, again, previous comments, it's a lot of overlapping jurisdictions. Stuff back in the 90s, once upon a time, there was a ministry of environment that did these things. Now there's local government with a ministry that retains the ability to approve. And so there is a big onus on the municipality to provide the oversight of the process that the province does retain. And I think that Ms. Wade and Mr. Simon did a great job in putting together a very complex package.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to an 11E grant and aid requests. There's 3 grant and aid requests here. And Mr. Nettle, any comments, or Ms. McCabe, you're on. Any comments before we put the motion on the table?
No, I'm just here for questions, Your Worship.
Okay, Mr. Nettle, any comments before we put the motion on the table?
I don't think so, Your Worship. I can address any questions that may come up through discussion.
All right, thank you. Someone want a motion, put this on, Councilor Sherlock.
If the following grant and aid applications be approved as is on the screen.
Great, thank you. Seconder for the motion, Councilor Brooks Hill. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Gillette.
Yeah, I'm curious about the signage for the bee city, for the pollinator-friendly habitat. Just in the interest of keeping everything consistent, does this have any tie-in to our wayfinding strategy? I'm wondering, just to clarify the question, is just typically in business, if you have branding and a look to something, there's a brand package that then other signage can be made to fit, or at least not conflict, so that we can build on things in the future. I'm just wondering if that fits in with this, or is this a completely different scale and I'm completely on the wrong track?
So, Ms. McKidd, do you know anything, or Ms. Donato, regarding the signing? Is it going to look similar to what we've already got out there for wayfinding signage, or is it going to be, I guess we received a certificate from the bee pollination group and it's got some yellows and bees and stuff on it? Is it going to be that sort of thing?
Through your worship, that's my understanding. They have sent me the quote for the signage costs, and it does not look like there's any consistency with the wayfinding. This is just to identify gardens and other locations that are pollinator friendly. So it's not wayfinding per se. So yeah.
All right. Ms. Donato, any comment?
Through your worship, no, I think Ms. McCabe addressed that. It is completely different than the wayfinding project. The signs will vary, the sign sizes will vary, placement will vary throughout the city as well. Some may be in gardens, some may be in larger areas. So the sign design itself will remain consistent, but how we mount it may vary.
Does that answer your question, Council? Okay. Any further comments on these grant and aid applications? I'm definitely supportive of them. Councillor Ryan and I kind of went through some of the other stuff a while ago. Are you comfortable with this, Council? All right. I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you again. We're going to work on to 11F, events planning post-COVID. You want to make any comments, Mr. Donato, before we put the motion on the table?
Thank you, Your Worship. I can give a brief overview if Council wishes.
Would you like that, Council? Go ahead.
Okay, so with the recent relaxation of the COVID restrictions, as you can imagine, I've been receiving numerous inquiries from event organizers on the city's stance with respect to hosting events on municipal-owned property. So given the recent changes to the public health order on gathering and events, in particular, the lifting of restrictions on organized outdoor gatherings, a lot of the normal processes that we've been going through and events that we've had planned in the past can return to something like pre-pandemic conditions. So the report highlights some of the changes that came into effect, in particular, the capacity for outdoor events, the restriction on flow-through events like festivals and fairs. They no longer have limits on numbers. Reference to COVID safety plans and any COVID signage no longer exist, so we can move forward with different event planning. To put it all in context, I have received some special event applications from event organizers such as the Revelstoke Arts Council for Guerrilla Gigs and the Luna event. Some merchants in the downtown area for sidewalk sales. And then Wild Site Revelstoke has put in a request for an outdoor movie night at Queen Elizabeth Park. All of these events are permissible under the new guidelines on events and gatherings, and they can all be managed in the locations that have been requested. So I'm basically looking for council feedback on whether or not they would like me to start authorizing approval for these events.
Great, thank you, Ms. Donato. Thank you for giving some input, because I think it's important for the community to hear what we're talking about. Councillor Palmer, you have a question?
I'll put the motion on the table that staff be authorized to sign off on special event permits on city property that are in line with the current public health directives.
Seconded by Councillor Shalat.
I'd like
Any
to
further?
speak to the motion.
Go ahead.
So I think we're kind of doing what's more or less been happening, but it's really important for the city to be very agile. And I think by authorizing staff to move, whether, there's a risk, hopefully it doesn't happen, but things tighten up. And so this will give Lori the ability to read as things are going on. So I would like to see that agility for the city. So I think that's very good. I do have a question regarding the farmers market. Is there movement to getting that back downtown? I think it would be really good to have that back in our city because I think it draws people and it's more convenient for those that use the market.
Mr. Nam, any comment? I know that we're talking about some work in Grizzly Plaza. Any comment on that?
Thank you, Your Worship. In regards to the farmers market, I have had some preliminary conversations with both markets on relocating to the downtown core. And my recommendation is just that they remain in place for this year. In the past, we have had some concerns brought forward from the businesses, mainly in Grizzly Plaza, around concerns over the market's impact on their sales and on their circulation of customer and vehicle mobility in front of their establishments. So I think this is a good opportunity to really have a look and see how well these businesses do downtown without the market's presence this year, given that restrictions are relaxed and we may see increased traffic in the downtown area due to more visitors in the community this year versus last year. I've also been working with Ms. Braun on this, who is working through the chamber on polling the businesses right now to kind of get their view on what they would like to see happen in the downtown core as part of some outreach activities that the chamber's doing. So I think it's a good opportunity this year to revisit what we're doing and perhaps have them just remain in place. We also have the proposed renovation for Grizzly Plaza that may commence this fall or as early as next spring. So I think moving the markets back for the remaining 2 months and then having them relocate again in the spring may cause some confusion around where they're actually going to be situated. And I think everyone's set up right now pretty well. So, I mean, my recommendation is that they remain in place, but if council feels differently, I'm willing to move forward with that. I don't know if Ms. Braun wants to add anything to that as well.
Ms. Braun, do you want to weigh in?
Through your worship, just to echo what Ms. Donato said, we've asked the outreach coordinator that's hired through the chamber previously with Community Futures, as they're doing their visits to businesses, to check with those on the downtown core to see what their preference is. I think when we undertook the engagement with businesses on Mackenzie, when we were looking at the possibility of closing Mackenzie, it was surprising to see the results, did not favor closing the street because of the impact on sales and a lot of them referenced market days, knowing that their sales dropped by a certain amount during the market days, and they weren't in favor of doing that for the entire summer. 1 day a week was palatable, but full-time was not. So I would like to revisit that kind of information, and starting with the outreach coordination, and then maybe a more concerted effort in the fall when summer's over and we have a sense from businesses themselves, have they done better? Did they do better on weekends? With the return of visitors, what were the impacts? And then yes, the Grizzly Plaza renovations, it'll be confusing for visitors to relocate the markets and then bring it back again. So I concur with Director Donato that it makes sense to do nothing for now and revisit later in the fall once we've had the chance to consult with businesses. So what she said.
Great, thank you. So Councillor Palmer, any further comment?
Yeah, so I'll just comment. I would like to see the farmers markets brought back into the town core. If there's things that aren't working for the businesses, and I know that's been a long-standing thing, those things need to get corrected. That's probably a conversation for another time rather than on this. The farmers market should draw more customers to the businesses if it's working well, in my view. And so that's again a whole other dialogue. And then just to comment on the Grizzly renos, it would be good to have a little bit more communication. It's not directly related to this issue right now, but just there was some concerns on what exactly those rentals are, the timeframes. Again, that's some of the businesses were raising concerns around that. But I think the motion on the table is, in the meantime, is giving staff flexibility and we can bring these issues.
Great. Councillor Elliott, you have a question?
I can just, testimonials that I've received about the lack of community spirit on the weekend and the loss of our sort of identity in our downtown core is significant with the split market. I mean, both are maybe doing okay, but they're not thriving.
Yeah.
And I think the sooner we can get back to building what the downtown was designed for, is creating traffic, creating a buzz, creating energy, creating a community. That's important. And the sooner we can get to that, the better. And there's an easy solution to, if the Grizzly Plaza is such a confrontation for the permanent retailers in that zone, why not extend down to Main Street, third Street, go second, you know, it's an easy fix as far as I can see. And, but I just think that there's something missing in our community right now. And we've got 2 months, the traffic may improve, may get to, may improve somewhat with the tourism, but I don't think it's going to reach the masses that we've had in years past.
Well, you know, when I saw this Saturday, it was incredibly busy downtown Mackenzie Avenue. So I'm not poo-pooing what you're saying. I think we need to give some thought to it, but that's a conversation for another day.
I would suggest that the chamber get out there now and get a feel for both those retailers in both those, because they're the ones that should be, you know, cracking wood to move this thing forward.
Well, that's what Ms. Brown was just talking about. Where...
So not next year. They've got, you know, the suggestion right now is leave it till next September or leave it till next, possibly even.
Are you going to sit in Mr. Palmer's lap or?
Yeah, I'm just saying we pushed it further back, and I'm saying maybe that's not what we need to do. We need more action now.
Okay, so that definitely is a conversation for another day. Appreciate both of you and your input. Councillor Brooks.
Could we ask to talk about this at the next council meeting?
Sure, we'll bring it up to the next council meeting. Yeah. All right, good enough. So the motion on the table, anyone want to make further comment on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 11G.
If I may, can I just make a motion that we have the discussion on the committee of the whole in 2 days' time? Just a brief discussion.
We've already got that published. Do we have time to do that?
I'm sure.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to Ms. Finano, Ms. Braun, discussing farmers market at committee of the whole. Do you have time to get something together, or do we need to wait for a little bit? You're waiting.
I'm just looking for a general conversation too.
Okay. You okay with that?
Yes, Your Worship.
All right, thanks. We'll get it put on the agenda. Thank you. Thanks. All right, moving on to item 11G, Public Works Greenbelt Paving Award. Mr. Komanowski, any comments before we put the motion on the table?
Yes, Your Worship. Maybe I'll just give a brief history on this. We did post this on Bonfire just recently, closed approximately 2 weeks ago. We only received one bid. Unfortunately, that bid came in very high from General Assembly, $791,000. Way beyond our wildest expectations on the quotes we did last year by our engineering department. And then we had a consultant from WSP did a quote this spring of approximately 500. So unfortunately, the bid came in high. But knowing that, we thought we would try to mitigate this budget and get as much done as we possibly could. If we do get approximately 700, I believe that we could go back to the contractor and get 99% of this done, in my opinion. So that's kind of where we stand. The unit prices all came in very high, obviously, so that was unfortunate. But with the supplement of this 250,000, we could still carry forward and get most of this project done.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's get the motion on the table, and then we can have further discussion if it need be. Someone bring it forward, please. Councillor Charlotte.
Sure, we're doing this in part 1 and part 2 or all together?
Yes, part 1 and part 2.
Okay, that $456,200 received from the Tourism Dependent Communities Fund be allocated to the preservation and upgrading of the Greenbelt Trails project, and that any additional funds received from the Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program application submitted in July 2021 be approved for use to complete the Greenbelt Trails project.
Okay, second for the motion, please. Councilor Bartel, any discussion on this motion? I think Mr. Komanowski has basically spelled it out and pretty straightforward. Seeing no further comments, I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Part 2. You want to put that on as well, Mr.
Sure. That General Assembly be awarded the contract in an amount not to exceed the funding awarded through the Tourism Dependent Communities Fund and Active Transportation Grant Program.
Okay, second for the motion. Councilor Bartel, any further discussion on this motion? Councilor Ali.
Maybe just, if Darren could add why his feeling, why he's so little interest in doing the job.
Mr. Komanowski, any comment on that?
Yes, Your Worship. Unfortunately, when you post position or tenders this time of year, most construction companies are booked. So they throw, if I may use the word, outlandish price at something, and sometimes it sticks. You know, unfortunately, we didn't have the option to put this out in February due to the application with the grant and our budgeting process. If we would put it out in the winter months, undoubtedly you would see better pricing come in and more contractors to bid, because they wouldn't have their construction schedules filled for the construction seasons.
So if we stall the paving till next summer, are we in jeopardy of losing the funding?
Mr. Komanowski.
I believe so, but maybe I'll defer that to Ms. Braun, if I could, please.
Through your worship, yes, I submitted the application for the Tourism Dependent Communities Fund. I believe we have 2 years, so I can confirm that, and I will do that tomorrow and get back to Darren Komanowski. And I believe we have 2 years though to complete the work.
So yeah, I would suggest taking an outlandish price doesn't seem to make much sense if we can get a better price next spring. So maybe defer it.
Councilor Poppin and Councilor Chalette.
So I move that we table the motion subject to confirmation on the grant funding timelines.
Okay, so second for that motion. We actually have the other motion on the table. Do we have?
This is a table. I'm sorry, the table motion. So
okay, yeah. So someone second to table that motion. Councilor Ryan. Okay, we'll table that motion and get further input from staff on that. Councilor Chalette.
Just a quick question. There's no risk to delaying this approval if we don't have, just to confirm from Mr. Komanowski. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Komanowski, you have your hand up. What about delays?
Yeah, I would caution against delaying it till next construction season. We just don't know what the pricing's going to do. We're in place for this project. You know, from my perspective, WSP has done a good job getting this contractor lined up. Yes, the price is high, but I don't know by delaying it if we're going to gain anything. To be honest, I would recommend that we move ahead and get the project done this year.
Okay.
So, Councilor Mayor Sulz, the table motion isn't a delay motion. It's just clarification on that. It may lead to that discussion. I guess the only concern is on the award, but you know, because this is 2 weeks until the next council meeting. But even if that was a problem, we could call a special council meeting with unanimous consent on the committee of the whole to bring it off the table and pass it if that's the appropriate thing to do.
Okay, any comment, Mr. Matusi?
No, again, go back to Darren. I think that, you know, if, as long as that 2 week period or if it has to be rushed forward to do it, I think the question was more about clarification than delaying the whole overall process.
Yeah, because I think what Councillor Elliott is saying, and I agree, is that the way this has been articulated, they put it up, I think the word was an outlandish amount. And then is that prudent for council to be approving something that's outlandish? So I think that just gives us a little bit of time to pause to make sure that we're making a good decision here.
Okay, Mr. Komanowski, you have your hand up.
Yes, I guess timing is very prudent on this. They are set to start on the 27th of July, and that is their construction schedule. So that's also something to keep in mind.
Okay. Councillor Shabbat.
Yeah, when the comment about the outlandish amount had come forward, it was about the 700,000 amount that was originally bid on the project, I believe. If we were to delay, because right now we're looking at tabling the motion until the next council meeting to see if we have grant funding for 2 years so that we could delay it for the next construction season. Realistically, do you have an idea of, like you said, we don't know what construction costs would be next year. What would be a more reasonable rate? Like how much money are we talking about potentially saving here if we were to build next year rather than this year?
Your worship, like I said, with who knows what happens with construction prices this year. I mean, look what happened with the price of timber this year. Nobody could foresee that. With petroleum and bitumen prices for asphalt could do the same thing, and we might be looking at spending more. So it's hard to say. But the unit prices that did come in were at least a third higher than what we saw on other projects that we had put out earlier in the construction season. However, you just don't know what comes up for next year, I guess would be my caution. And the price that did come in from General Assembly was $791.
Ms. Braun.
Oh, just further comment that I defer, although I will look into the timing for the grant, I do certainly defer to the expertise of the engineering department and public works, especially given the staff capacity and the work plan, lineup of major infrastructure projects coming down the pipeline over the next 6 months to a year. Sorry, Darren.
Just a minute. Are you finished, Ms. Brown?
Yeah, just to say we've brought in a lot of grant funding and it's starting to pile up, and there's impacts on staff capacity as well that I would also want to be cognizant of with respect to the recommendations made by Engineering and Public Works.
All right, thank you. Councilor Palmer.
Mayor Sulz, what I would like to do with this tabling motion is have this come back at the committee of the whole on Thursday. This is a very short delay. Gives us just a little bit of time because it's a lot of money, and to just make sure we get this right, confirmation on the timing, even if we're pushing ahead, that's already there. But if this also gives opportunity for Mr. Komnowski to go back to to negotiate on that price, those unit prices, I think, because there's only one bid on this, and so where are we at if we wait for 2 days? I know that would require a special council meeting, but it's just a unanimous consent if we're all going to be here. So it does. I'm not wondering if that works for Darren.
Well, he's just raised his hand, so comment?
Yeah, Your Worship. Callan is the name of our consultant from WSP. He's already tried to negotiate unit prices with General Assembly, and the only thing they suggest is reducing the scope down to our budget of 456. They're not willing to change the unit prices. That's already been asked of them.
Comment, Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, we either go with either agree or disagree on the tabling motion. I put the motion on. I think I might vote against it.
Okay, let's vote on that tabling motion. Anyone want to table that motion for a few days? All in favor? Opposed? Note that Councillor Elliott's in favor, everyone else is opposed. Okay, going back to the original contract, General Assembly be awarded the contract. Any further discussion on that? Councillor Elliott.
We had be out of your mind if you were doing this on your own dollar to spend it on your first bid at the highest price that you can get, and not any debate on that. If you were dealing with this on your own out of your own wallet, you'd just say we'll wait till next year.
And I don't think any of us disagree with that, but we can get some work done with the $456,200. And so that was the intention. Is that correct, Mr. Komnowski? We use that money if we can't get any other grant money, at least we can get some things done, correct?
Yes, we can get done from behind Centennial Park all the way in north into Jordan Drive underneath the Trans-Canada Bridge.
All right, good.
So we get a third more next year if we don't at a fair price.
Maybe.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah, but,
Councilor Palmer.
To Mr. Pomenowski, when was the tender, when did it close?
I don't have the exact date, but approximately 10 days ago. So recently, yeah.
Okay, so, Mayor Sulz, I'll be voting in support of this. I was considering voting against it based on Councillor Elliott's comments. But petroleum prices are going up. It may be a third more next year anyway because of he disagrees, but that's okay. So I'll be voting in support.
That's what it's about. All right, I'll call the question. Oh, Councillor Shaw, you have a comment?
I was just going to comment that as much as I also appreciate Councillor Elliott's points about the cost and what we would do if this was in our own household, but it's unfortunately, as much as it is a big price tag for an average household, for the city, it is relatively minor, less major, I guess. It feels weird saying that about money, but I'm really mindful of the capacity. We just have too many big things coming down the pipe, and paving the green belt is not one of our top priorities right now. It needs to get done. Let's get it done.
Any further comments on the motion on the table? I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note that Councillor Palmer and Councillor Elliott are opposed, and the balance of council are in favor. Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kolanowski, Ms. Braun. Appreciate your input. Ms. Floyd, any questions from the press?
No, we have not received any questions from the press, Your Worship.
All right, so I want to go in camera pursuant to section 90.1 A, E, and K of the community charter. Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Palmer, Councillor Brooks Hill, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. We are now going to go in camera. We'll take a 5-minute break and
See my
Cindy, do you need me?